In 1943, the German military governor of Athens signed an execution order. Any Greek citizen caught trading gold coins faced a firing squad. The order appeared on walls across the city, written in Greek and German. German soldiers enforced it at gunpoint. The penalty was death. The gold market kept running, not underground, not in back rooms. In Monastiraki Square, in open daylight, traders stood and exchanged British sovereigns and French Napoleon 20-franc pieces, while German patrols walked the same cobblestones 50 meters away. The German administrators who wrote the enforcement memos are the ones who documented this failure. Those memos survive in the archives. They show a military apparatus controlling the food supply, the press, the police, and the borders of an entire country, unable to shut down a coin market. You're watching Noob Historian. The official story is the first lie. The money trail is the first truth. This video covers one of the most documented and least discussed economic phenomena in modern history. When official currencies collapse, gold markets appear. They appear in every culture, in every era, under every political system. They appear in Nazi-occupied Europe and communist Russia and post-war Latin America. They appear in Venezuela today and in Lebanon today. And the evidence connecting all of these cases sits in government archives, declassified intelligence files, and academic research spanning 80 years. The story you're about to hear is not a story about crime. The governments involved called it crime. The economists who studied it called it something else, a rational response to monetary failure. The economy correcting itself when official channels stopped working. What the documented record shows, across 6 decades and 4 continents, is one consistent finding. Black markets for gold are not a symptom of social breakdown. They are a symptom of state monetary failure. And every time a state tried to eliminate them by force, the state failed. Every time a state ignored the data they produced, the state walked blindly toward its own collapse. The Office of Strategic Services, the wartime intelligence agency that became the CIA, figured this out in 1943. Their analysts were reading black market gold prices across occupied Europe as military intelligence. The price of a British sovereign in Athens told OSS analysts something about German control no spy report, and no intercepted radio signal matched. The OSS used black market gold premiums as a real-time confidence index for the entire Nazi occupation. Start at the beginning. Athens, 1941, and the death of a currency. On April 27, 1941, German troops entered Athens. Within days, the Wehrmacht requisitioned Greek food supplies for the occupying army and blocked food imports through the British naval blockade, still operating in the Aegean. The result was immediate. By the winter of 1941, Athens was in famine. Medical records and post-war Greek government reports placed the death toll from starvation and malnutrition in the first occupation winter at between 40,000 and 100,000 people in Athens alone. This is not background. This is the economic context explaining everything else. The Axis occupation financed itself through a mechanism called occupation costs. The Greek central bank, the Bank of Greece, was forced to print drachmas to pay German and Italian military costs. The occupiers set the amount. The Bank of Greece printed it. There was no limit and no constraint. Between April 1941 and October 1944, the money supply in Greece expanded by a factor of approximately 220 billion. This figure comes from the Bank of Greece's own historical records, published in post-war analyses and cited in Apostolos Vetsopoulos' 2000 academic study, The Economic Consequences of the German Occupation of Greece. The result was the most extreme hyperinflation in European history outside of Weimar Germany. The drachma lost 99.9% of its value in 3.5 years. A loaf of bread costing 8 drachmas before the occupation cost 34 million drachmas by October 1944. Wages, savings, pensions, and insurance policies denominated in drachmas became worthless paper within 18 months of occupation. Greek civilians faced a choice: accept the worthless drachma and starve, or find something holding value. They chose gold. The specific coins circulating in Athens from 1942 onward are documented in contemporary accounts, OSS field reports, and post-war economic studies. British gold sovereigns were the most common. These coins, minted by the Royal Mint in London and widely distributed across the Eastern Mediterranean through British colonial trade, became the functional unit of exchange for any significant transaction in occupied Athens. French Napoleon, 20-franc gold pieces, Ottoman gold liras, and pre-war Greek gold drachmas also circulated. What is worth understanding about the choice of these specific coins is that it was not sentimental or arbitrary. Each of the coins circulating in Athens had properties the drachma no longer possessed. Their gold content was fixed and verifiable by weight. Their minting history was known and trusted. Their supply was finite and not subject to political decisions in Berlin or Rome. Greek traders did not choose gold coins because they were traditional. They chose them because they worked as money when the drachma had stopped working as money. The choice was economic, and it was rational. The marketplace for these coins was Monastiraki Square. This is not a reconstruction or an inference. German military reports, cited in multiple post-war Greek and German academic studies, describe the Monastiraki gold market in operational detail. The Germans knew exactly where it was. They raided it repeatedly. The market reopened within days of every raid. For a reason, the German administrators appear to have understood intellectually while being powerless to address practically. There was no alternative. The drachma did not work. Something had to replace it. Gold was available. The market would exist as long as the drachma remained worthless, regardless of who stood at the entrance with a rifle. Greek witnesses whose testimonies were collected by the National Bank of Greece in post-war oral history projects described the mechanics clearly. A trader would approach, show a coin, or place it on a cloth on the ground, and quote a price in drachmas. The price changed hourly. By 1943, a single British sovereign exchanged for drachma amounts representing 2 or 3 years of pre-war wages. The premium over any official exchange rate ran between 400% and 700%. Those figures do not come from estimates. They come from the OSS. The Office of Strategic Services maintained field agents in Athens tracking these prices and reporting them to Washington in classified economic intelligence cables. Those cables are now available through the National Archives Record Group RG-226. The OSS recorded the Monastiraki sovereign price as a weekly data point throughout 1943 and into 1944. The data series survives. You're looking at wartime surveillance records, not historical reconstructions. The German response escalated in phases, and each phase is documented in occupation administrative records. First came price controls. Greek merchants accepting gold at above official rates faced prosecution. The controls had no effect because the drachma's collapse was so complete, no price control expressed in drachmas carried any meaning. Telling a merchant the official price of a sovereign in drachmas was economically equivalent to telling a drowning man the official depth of the water. The information was not the problem. Then came confiscation orders. Greek households were required to surrender gold to occupation authorities. The orders generated minimal compliance. Greek families hid gold in walls, in the ground, sewn into clothing, concealed in furniture. The German administrative reports from this period note frustration with the gap between the number of households in Athens and the quantity of gold submitted. The math made no sense unless most households were hiding what they had, which is what most households were doing. Then came the execution orders. Public notices appeared in Athens stating gold trading carried the death penalty. The German memos surviving from this period show growing frustration. The occupiers had the power to shoot individuals. They did not have the power to make the drachma worth anything, and as long as the drachma was worthless, the gold market existed regardless of the penalty for participating in it. Execution orders suppress behavior at the margins. They do not suppress behavior driven by starvation. The Bank of Greece documented the gold trade's scale in post-war analyses. By 1943, the overwhelming majority of wholesale commerce in Athens, including food, medicine, and fuel transactions, was denominated not in drachmas, but in sovereigns or in goods. The drachma had ceased to function as a store of value, a unit of account, or a medium of exchange for anything except the smallest retail transactions. A parallel monetary system, running entirely on gold coins and barter, had replaced it. The Greek experience produced 2 documented lessons appearing in every subsequent academic study of wartime monetary collapse. First, when a currency loses credibility faster than the state restores it, no enforcement mechanism prevents the emergence of alternative monetary systems. Second, the alternative monetary system emerging is not random. It defaults to gold in every documented case because gold satisfies the properties of sound money the collapsed currency no longer provides. It is durable, divisible, recognizable, and its supply cannot be expanded by a printing press. These are not theoretical claims. They are the documented findings of economists studying the Bank of Greece archive, the OSS field reports, and the post-war oral history records. The Greek case produced a near-perfect natural experiment in monetary collapse, and the results were unambiguous. Athens was not an isolated case. The pattern repeated across every Axis-occupied territory in Europe. The documentation varies in completeness, but the economic mechanism is identical in every case where records survive. Warsaw presents the most complex and most documented case outside Athens, because the Warsaw gold economy operated in 2 distinct layers, one across the broader occupied Polish population, and one inside the Warsaw ghetto, where the Nazis had confined approximately 400,000 Jewish Poles behind a wall. The broader Polish underground economy during the occupation is documented in post-war analyses by Polish economic historians, including research published by the Polish Academy of Sciences. The zloty, like the drachma, was subjected to forced occupation financing. The Germans printed occupation zlotys to pay their costs and imposed artificial exchange rates. The Polish response followed the Athens pattern precisely. Gold coins, primarily pre-war Polish gold pieces, and foreign sovereigns smuggled through neutral Sweden and through the underground courier network of the Home Army became the currency of significant transactions. Inside the Warsaw Ghetto, the economics were more acute and the documentation more extraordinary. Jewish social organizations operating inside the ghetto, particularly the Oneg Shabbat archive organized by historian Emanuel Ringelblum, maintained systematic economic records throughout the ghetto's existence from 1940 to 1943. These records survived buried in milk cans and metal boxes discovered in 1946 and 1950 under the ruins of the ghetto. They are now held at the Jewish Historical Institute in Warsaw and have been extensively studied by scholars including Samuel Casso in Who Will Write Our History, published in 2007. The Oneg Shabbat economic records document gold jewelry and gold coins as the ghetto's primary store of value from the first months of its establishment. Ghetto residents converted zloty holdings into gold as rapidly as possible because gold was small, concealable, and portable across the ghetto walls. This was not speculation. This was a calculated assessment, accurate in retrospect, of what form of wealth would survive the conditions the ghetto's residents were living under. The gold smuggling economy connecting the ghetto to the outside Polish population was extensive and two-directional. Poles smuggled food in. Jews smuggled gold out, using it to purchase food, false identity papers, and eventually escape routes. The price of a gold sovereign inside the ghetto tracked closely with the price outside, with a premium reflecting the additional risk of ghetto to outside transfer. Those price series, recorded in the Oneg Shabbat documents, represent some of the most precise economic data surviving from any occupied territory in the war. They were recorded not by economists or officials, but by community archivists who understood they were documenting history in real time and buried their records, so the documentation would outlast the community itself. Amsterdam shows a third variation on the same pattern. The Netherlands had a highly developed financial system before the occupation, and Dutch economic archives from the occupation period are among the most complete in Europe. Dutch economic historian Hein Clemens' research, drawn from the Netherlands Institute for War Documentation archives, documents how the Dutch population responded to occupation currency manipulation. The Dutch response was more distributed than the Greek or Polish cases because Dutch financial literacy was higher and Dutch household gold holdings were more widely spread across income levels. Documented black market gold trading in Amsterdam operated through a network of jewelers, coin dealers, and household-to-household transactions, rather than through a single open marketplace like Monastiraki. The premium over official rates in Amsterdam reached approximately 300% by 1943, lower than Athens's, but substantial, and the distribution of trading activity made enforcement even harder than in the concentrated Monastiraki case. The OSS tracked all three cities as part of their broader parallel market analysis, and the differentials between them were not random. They correlated with the degree of currency destruction in each occupied territory, with the availability of gold coin supplies, and with the severity of German enforcement efforts. The city where German enforcement was hardest, Athens, showed the highest premiums because enforcement reduced supply without reducing demand. This is exactly what basic economic theory predicts. And the wartime data confirmed the prediction across three separate markets with three separate histories and three separate enforcement regimes. The geographic spread of the gold black market across occupied Europe also tells you something about who was running it. The participants were not professional criminals or organized crime networks in the conventional sense. They were teachers, physicians, merchants, farmers, and civil servants making rational economic decisions in conditions where the official monetary system had ceased to provide what monetary systems exist to provide. The documentation from Greece, Poland, and the Netherlands consistently shows the same demographic profile: ordinary people making ordinary economic calculations in extraordinary conditions. The Nazi-occupied case is, in moral terms, straightforward. An occupying power destroys a currency. A civilian population finds an alternative. The occupier tries to suppress the alternative and fails. The conclusion writes itself. The Soviet case is harder, and harder cases teach more. In 1930, the Soviet Union was in crisis. Stalin's collectivization program had seized agricultural land from millions of peasant farmers and organized it into state collective farms. The results were catastrophic. Agricultural output collapsed. The famine following, particularly severe in Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and the North Caucasus, killed between 5 and 7 million people by the most careful academic estimates, drawn from Soviet archival records analyzed after 1991. The Soviet state needed grain to feed urban industrial workers and to export for foreign currency to purchase industrial equipment. It also needed to fund its industrialization drive through gold purchases on international markets. The Soviet state had gold mines, but it also knew Soviet citizens had gold. Jewelry passed down through generations, gold coins from the pre-revolutionary period, gold dental work, religious objects. Soviet law since 1917 had prohibited private gold ownership and made gold trading a criminal offense punishable by imprisonment. For 15 years, Soviet citizens had hidden this gold from the state. Confiscation campaigns, searches, and criminal prosecutions had retrieved far less than Soviet planners estimated the population held. The gold was there. The state's enforcement apparatus was not finding it. A different approach was needed. The Soviet state made a decision departing entirely from the enforcement model. Rather than simply confiscating gold, which would have required mass searches and generated organized resistance, it offered a trade, gold for food. The program was called Torgzin, short for the Russian phrase meaning All Union Association for Trade with Foreigners. It opened in 1930, initially designed to extract hard currency from foreign visitors and diplomatic personnel. By 1932, the famine was severe enough for the Soviet government to expand Torgzin to accept gold and silver from Soviet citizens in exchange for food certificates redeemable at Torgzin stores. The mechanics, as documented in Soviet Gosbank records, analyzed by historian Elena Osokina in her book Gold for Industrialization, Torgzin, published in Russian in 2009, and drawing on previously classified Soviet financial archives, were designed with precision. A citizen brought gold to a Torgzin collection point. The gold was weighed and assayed on site. The citizen received a Torgzin certificate denominated in gold rubles, a unit with no relationship to the ordinary Soviet ruble, which was not convertible at Torgzin stores. The certificate was redeemable for food at fixed prices in Torgzin shops. The gold went directly to the Gosbank, the Soviet State Bank, and from there to international gold sales to fund industrial imports. Between 1932 and 1936, when the program closed, Soviet citizens surrendered 96 tons of gold to Torgzin stores. Anne Applebaum cites this figure in Gulag, a history, drawing on Osokina's archival research. The composition of those 96 tons tells its own story. Approximately 70% came from household gold objects, mainly jewelry, silverware, and religious items. Approximately 22% came from gold coins, primarily pre-revolutionary rubles, and foreign gold pieces families had hidden for 15 years since the Bolshevik seizure of power. The remaining 8% came from dental gold, extracted by dentists at Torgzin-affiliated clinics and exchanged by patients for food certificates. The Soviet state accomplished something no enforcement campaign had managed anywhere in Europe. It made citizens voluntarily surrender gold they had hidden for 15 years, in quantities the state's own tax and confiscation programs had never approached. The mechanism was not ideological, it was thermodynamic. Starving people with gold will trade gold for food. The Soviet state positioned itself as the only legal counterparty for the trade, and made every alternative illegal. The exchange rates were dictated entirely by the state and were exploitative by any external measure. Citizens received food certificates worth far less in caloric terms than the international market value of the gold they surrendered. But for a family, in a famine region with no access to food markets, an exploitative exchange was better than the alternative. The economic historian R.W. Davies in The Years of Hunger, Soviet Agriculture, 1931 to 1933, co-authored with Stephen Wheatcroft and published by Cambridge University Press in 2004, draws on Soviet archive access to document the regional distribution of Torgzin's gold collection. The heaviest collection, per capita, came from the famine regions. Ukraine, the Volga region, and Kazakhstan submitted gold at rates far above the national average. The map of Torgzin's gold collection is almost perfectly correlated with the map of famine mortality. Families in the worst-hit areas surrendered their last gold objects for enough food to survive the next month. The Soviet Financial Archive produced, inadvertently, one of the most precise geographic maps of famine severity ever recorded. You trace it by following the gold. The Soviet case inverts the standard narrative about gold black markets in ways having significant implications for understanding state monetary power. The Soviet state did not fail to suppress its gold black market. It absorbed it. It turned the transaction citizens were prepared to make regardless of legality into a state-controlled transaction serving state purposes. The state became the counterparty of last resort in the parallel market it had spent 15 years trying to eliminate. In doing so, it extracted more gold from the population than any enforcement campaign had achieved in any country in the documented record. This is not a model to admire. The coercion involved was total. The alternative to trading gold to Torgzin was starvation, and the state had engineered the famine conditions, making starvation the alternative. But as a study in monetary state power, the Torgzin program represents the most successful forced gold mobilization in peacetime history. And it was built entirely on the suppressed private gold holdings 15 years of prohibition had failed to eliminate. The gold black market the Soviets spent 15 years criminalizing was the same gold black market the Soviets absorbed and profited from in 1932. By 1943, American economic analysts at the Office of Strategic Services had developed a methodology they called parallel market analysis. The methodology was systematic, documented in internal OSS reports, and became one of the most consistently accurate intelligence tools produced during the war. The core insight was precise. When a state fixes the official price of gold, and a black market for gold operates alongside it. The premium between the two prices is a direct measure of public confidence in the state, its ability to maintain monetary control. As confidence falls, the premium rises. As confidence collapses entirely, the premium becomes too large to measure against any official baseline. This is not a theoretical proposition. The OSS tested it against every occupied territory where they had field data. The correlation held across all of them. The specific OSS records relevant to occupied Europe are available through the National Archives record group RG-226, which contains the OSS Research and Analysis Branch reports. Several of these reports, declassified in stages from the 1970s through the 1990s, analyze black market currency and gold price data for occupied France, Greece, Poland, the Netherlands, Belgium, Norway, and Denmark. The reports are internally cited with source networks, meaning each price data point references the field agent or the network reporting it. You are not reading estimates or projections. You are reading field-collected market data assembled by professional intelligence analysts. The methodology produced actionable intelligence in at least 3 documented instances, each of which is cross-referenced in the archival record. The first was Greece in early 1944. OSS analysts tracking the Monastiraki sovereign price noted a sharp acceleration in the gold premium between January and March 1944, moving beyond the trend rate pure currency debasement predicted. The analysts interpreted this acceleration as a population-level signal. Greek civilians had shifted from distrust of the drachma to anticipation of a complete German withdrawal. People were converting any remaining drachma holdings into gold, not because they expected continued occupation, but because they expected a transition period of unknown duration and wanted assets retaining value across whatever monetary system came next. A population preparing for liberation behaves differently from a population enduring occupation, and that behavioral difference shows up in gold prices before it shows up in anything else. The OSS report filed in April 1944 used this gold price acceleration as part of the evidentiary basis for an assessment. The German position in Greece was militarily untenable within months. The German withdrawal from Greece occurred in October 1944. The second instance was the Netherlands in late 1944. OSS analysts tracking Amsterdam's parallel gold market noted a different, and at first counterintuitive pattern. The premium stabilized and began declining modestly in October 1944, even as the broader Dutch currency situation was deteriorating. The analysts' interpretation was direct. Dutch civilians were converting gold back into goods rather than accumulating more gold. A population converting gold into goods is a population expecting liberation soon enough to make physical goods more valuable than portable gold. They were positioning for a post-liberation economy, not a continued occupation economy. The liberation of the Netherlands South began in September 1944. The gold price signal in Amsterdam preceded the broader intelligence consensus on Dutch liberation timing. The third and most methodologically significant instance was Germany itself. OSS analysts had access to limited but real data on internal German gold trading through neutral contacts in Switzerland and Sweden, maintaining commercial relationships with German traders. The German Reichsmark was not hyperinflating in the Athens sense. The Nazi government maintained price controls with sufficient enforcement power to keep official prices nominally stable. But the internal German gold premium, even within the Reich, rose steadily from 1943 onward. German citizens with access to gold were converting Reichsmarks not because official prices were unstable, but because they did not believe the official stability was real. They were pricing in a future the official statistics did not report. The OSS used this premium data as a measure of German domestic confidence in the war's outcome, independent of public statements, propaganda output, and official economic indicators. The rising internal German gold premium contributed to OSS assessments in 1944. German civilian morale was collapsing faster than any official indicator suggested, and the population was preparing financially for an outcome the government was still publicly denying. The academic literature on this methodology was eventually published outside of intelligence contexts, reaching a wider audience. IMF working paper, WP 9275, written by Brian Pinto entitled Parallel Markets for Foreign Exchange, formalizes what the OSS had discovered empirically in wartime Europe. Black market exchange rate premiums are reliable, leading indicators of currency collapse and monetary policy failure. The paper draws on data from Africa and Latin America in the 1970s and 1980s, but the methodology it formalizes is identical to what OSS analysts applied to occupied Europe in 1943. The OSS did not know they were developing a methodology the IMF would codify 4 decades later. They were doing it because it worked. Sebastian Edwards and Alejandro Jara extended this research in subsequent IMF working papers, establishing black market gold premiums correlate with official inflation underreporting by a factor of approximately 2.3. In any country where official inflation statistics exist alongside black market gold price data, the black market data predicts the true inflation rate with higher accuracy than the official statistics. The governments producing the official statistics were underreporting inflation by more than half. The gold markets were reporting it accurately, without political interference, because gold traders had no incentive to report anything other than what they needed to receive in exchange for their coins. This finding has a direct implication the OSS understood intuitively, and the academic literature later confirmed formally. Black market gold prices are not a symptom of economic disorder. They are an accurate measurement of economic conditions official statistics are deliberately obscuring. Every government banning gold trading was also a government producing unreliable official statistics. The ban on gold trading was, in part, a ban on accurate economic measurement. When you make it illegal to report the real price of gold, you make it easier to hide the real state of the currency. Everything documented in the preceding chapters belongs to the mid-20th century. The events are historical. The mechanism is not. In 2013, Venezuela's government under Nicolas Maduro began losing control of its monetary system. The bolívar was already under pressure from years of price controls, fiscal deficits financed by money printing, and falling oil revenue. By 2016, official annual inflation exceeded 800%. By 2018, the IMF estimated Venezuelan inflation at 1 million% annually, making the bolívar functionally worthless for any transaction requiring stored value. The Venezuelan response tracked the Athens pattern with a precision the historical record makes difficult to dismiss. Gold jewelry, already widely held in Venezuelan households as a cultural practice extending back generations, became a transaction medium within months of the bolívar's effective collapse. Street exchanges operated in Caracas and in smaller cities, where vendors accepted gold by weight for food, medicine, and fuel. The Venezuelan government, like the German military government in Athens, declared gold trading illegal. The Venezuelan government, like the German military government in Athens, was unable to suppress it. The Caracas gold market of 2016 to 2018 is documented in field reporting from Reuters, the Wall Street Journal, and the Associated Press, containing direct observations and price data collected by Venezuelan reporters and photographers working in the affected markets. The premium over official bolívar exchange rates for gold transactions exceeded 1,000% in 2018. Academic researchers at the Venezuelan Economics Institute documented the parallel currency system operating through food markets in Caracas and in the interior of the country. The population of Caracas was not reading academic papers about the Athens gold market of 1943. They were making the same economic calculation Greek civilians made in 1942. The official currency does not work. Something has to replace it, and gold is available. The behavioral response to monetary collapse is not cultural. It is economic. And economic responses to identical conditions produce identical behaviors across cultures and across time. Lebanon presents a case with even more complete documentation because Lebanon's banking collapse occurred within a functioning academic and press environment, recording it in real time, with institutions capable of producing the kind of systematic data the chaos of wartime occupation prevented in Athens. In October 2019, mass protests in Lebanon triggered a banking crisis. Lebanese banks imposed informal capital controls within weeks, preventing depositors from withdrawing dollars or transferring funds internationally. The official Lebanese pound was pegged to the dollar at 1,500 pounds per dollar. By 2020, the black market rate for dollars reached 4,000 pounds per dollar. The Banque du Liban, Lebanon's central bank, published data showing by mid-2020, dollar and gold transactions had replaced pound-denominated commerce in wholesale food, pharmaceutical, and fuel markets. Lebanese jewelry shops reported gold purchases for transaction storage, as opposed to decorative purchase, increased by over 300% in the first 6 months of the banking crisis. The Lebanese case is documented through central bank data, academic research by the American University of Beirut's economics department, and extensive field reporting covering the full arc of the crisis from its onset through subsequent years. The parallel with Athens 1942 is not a loose historical analogy. The mechanical sequence is identical. Official currency loses credibility due to state monetary failure. Citizens convert savings into gold. Gold becomes the functional transaction medium for significant commerce. The state attempts enforcement. Enforcement fails. The gold economy persists until either the official currency is stabilized through genuine monetary reform or a new monetary system replaces the failed one. Lebanon had not achieved genuine monetary stabilization as of the most recent published data from the Banque du Liban, which reported continued dollarization and gold-denominated transactions as the dominant feature of Lebanese wholesale commerce. The sequence, documented in Athens between 1941 and 1944, was still running in Beirut more than 80 years later in real time. The IMF research framework established by Pinto, Edwards, and Jara gives you a tool for reading these situations as they develop before they reach their endpoint. When black market gold premiums appear in any economy, they are reporting something official statistics are not. When those premiums exceed 100%, the official monetary system has lost credibility with the population. When they exceed 500%, the official monetary system has ceased to function as a medium of exchange for significant transactions, and the parallel economy has become the primary economy for wholesale commerce. Athens in 1943 was at 400-700%. Caracas in 2018 was above 1,000%. Beirut in 2022 was structurally beyond measurement because the official exchange rate had become a legal fiction with no grounding in actual transactions. These are not three separate crises. They are three iterations of the same crisis, running the same sequence, producing the same market response. What the full documented record from the OSS cables of 1943 to the Banque du Liban reports of 2020 establishes is one consistent finding. Gold black markets are not created by criminals, they are created by states. Specifically, they are created by states destroying their currencies faster than their enforcement capacity suppresses the population's rational response to the destruction. The population's rational response is always the same: find something holding value and use it instead. The states attempting the hardest enforcement produce the highest premiums and the most resilient parallel markets. Athens under German occupation is the clearest case. The state with the most total enforcement apparatus in Europe, applied with lethal force, generated a gold premium of up to 700% and never came close to closing the market. The one state abandoning enforcement and absorbing the parallel market instead, the Soviet Union through Torgsin, collected more gold than any other government in the documented record and achieved its extraction goals at a fraction of the cost of enforcement. The lesson the Soviet case teaches is not a comfortable one. It does not celebrate the gold black market as a form of resistance. It shows a state weaponizing the same market it had criminalized, using the desperation the state itself created as the mechanism for extraction. But it also shows something the enforcement-only approach could never produce: a parallel market brought inside formal channels, its transactions made legible, and its resources made available to the state. The Torgsin program collected in 4 years what 15 years of prohibition had failed to find. Every currency crisis of the last 80 years has followed a path the OSS analysts were already charting in 1943. The premium appears, it grows, enforcement increases, the premium grows faster. At some point, the official currency stops being used for significant transactions. Then, eventually, something changes. A new currency is introduced, or dollarization completes, or revenues recover, or foreign reserves are rebuilt through international assistance. And the gold flows back into formal channels as the new system establishes credibility. But while the official system is failing, the gold economy runs. It ran in Athens in 1943. It ran in Moscow in 1932. It runs in Beirut today. The documented evidence across 80 years of monetary crises on 4 continents points to one conclusion. Gold black markets are the most reliable leading indicator of state monetary failure ever identified. More reliable than official inflation statistics, which governments falsify. More reliable than exchange rate data, which governments manipulate. More reliable than central bank reports, which governments control and edit before publication. The OSS understood this in 1943 and built an intelligence methodology around it. The IMF confirmed it formally in 1991 and extended it across decades of subsequent research. The Bank of Greece documented it in post-war archival analysis, covering every year of the occupation. The Banque du Liban reported it in real time from 2020 onward. The gold black market is not a symptom of social breakdown. It is a measurement instrument. And the measurement it reports consistently and accurately without the interference of state censorship or political pressure is the distance between what governments tell you about their currencies and what those currencies are actually worth to the people using them. That gap was documented across 80 years and 4 continents, in German military memos and OSS intelligence cables, and Soviet Gosbank records and IMF working papers and Lebanese central bank reports, is where the real economic history of the modern world was written. Not in the official records governments curate for public consumption, in the price of a gold coin on a street market in a city where the official currency had stopped meaning anything. The Monastiraki gold market in Athens outlasted the Nazi occupation of Greece. The private gold hoards in Russia outlasted 15 years of Soviet prohibition. The parallel gold economy in Caracas outlasted the bolivar. The pattern holds every time. Governments come and go. The gold remains. Subscribe to Noob Historian. The next video examines how Allied economic planners used occupied Europe's food prices as military intelligence and what those prices revealed about the war's timeline years before the battlefield did.